And joining us right now to talk about it is former Reagan budget director David Stockman. And David, we have not seen a tax overhaul since your days overhauling the tax in the Reagan days.
Yeah, but there's a big difference.
Okay.
The national debt was $1 trillion then. It's $20 trillion today. When we got out of control, which happened in 1981, the tax cut became much bigger than intended. There was a budget surplus by the middle of the decade that we could cut. Today, they're facing $10 trillion of built-in debt before you even approach what Trump talked about the other night. I have to say, that speech was the most fiscally irresponsible speech given to the Congress since LBJ's, guns and butter.
What was so irresponsible about it?
He's going to raise defense. He's going to raise veterans. He's going to more for borders, more for education, the medical credit. On top of that, a massive tax cut for the middle class, a huge, big reduction in corporate taxes. The numbers don't even close to add up.
Well, maybe, but Steven Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, came on with us last week and basically walked us through some of the ideas that the president has been considering. One of them is this idea of a reciprocal tax, which would raise more than $1 trillion, just like a border adjustment tax. Listen to Steven Mnuchin, who joined us just on last Sunday.
An idea that he's looking at calling a reciprocal tax, which is basically saying we want to create a level playing field so that other countries treat us the way we're treating them. We're not going to get into trade wars, but what we are going to do is the president believes in free trade, but he believes in fair trade.
What about that? I mean, what about the idea to raise revenue, some kind of a tax at the border?
Yeah, I'm for a border adjustment tax. It's highly controversial. It'll take 2 years to get through the Congress at best. But before then, they're going to have the mother of all debt ceiling crises. I don't know why people can't see this. The debt.
We're not talking about this. This is coming up in a week and a half.
This is coming up closely. First of all, the president is totally misinformed and unprepared about the debt. He said the other day it's down 12 trillion or billion on his watch so far. Actually, in the first 35 days, the net debt was up $187 billion. He had $382 billion of cash the day he was sworn in. It's down to $178 billion now. They've burned through $200 billion of cash in the first 35 days.
How do they do that?
Because the government is still that far in deficit, and when the debt ceiling freezes in, when the holiday ends on March 15th, the clock will start ticking, and by the day, people will begin to realize they're going to run out of cash by June or July. A huge showdown is coming, and there is no pathway to a majority in the House or Senate to raise the debt ceiling by trillions. And that will back up everything. That Obamacare repeal and replace is turning into a catastrophe.
By the way, that's why they have to do tax reform during reconciliation. So because you'll get 51 votes. They need 51 votes versus the 60. That's why we're not going to see tax reform until after the summertime.
That's right. But to get the reconciliation,
go back, yeah.
They need a budget resolution for the next fiscal year, fiscal 18. But they have to have a debt ceiling increase before then.
So the debt ceiling deadline is March 15th.
The debt ceiling freezes in. Right now it's on holiday. They can borrow anything they want. On March 15, it'll freeze in at $20 trillion. There'll be $200 billion of cash on the balance sheet. It's going to dissipate by the day. When they get to zero cash, no borrowing authority, then where do they get a majority? The Freedom Caucus, Tea Party Republicans are not going to vote for a multi-trillion tax debt ceiling increase before they've repealed Obamacare.
Wow.
The Democrats are not going to help Trump as long as he is slamming their constituencies and putting up walls at the borders.
Well, they're not going to help him regardless. Come on,
they're not going to help.
They ran out like 3 seconds after he said, God bless America, the other night.
And this is my point, though. The market is totally missing the fact that the tax cut isn't going to happen, that instead there's going to be this terrible showdown on the debt ceiling that will create a panic and sell-off like we haven't seen before. So yesterday, was tulip bulb time. It was irrational exuberance on steroids, and this isn't going to last once it becomes clear that the clock is ticking on the debt ceiling.
Wow, it sounds like you would be selling into this 303 rally.
It would be
yesterday.
a perfect time to sell.
A perfect time to sell, huh? All right, now, the president also discussed some of the ideas about replacing Obamacare and talked about this timeline of Obamacare. First, he also talked about continuing to provide tax credits to help people buy insurance. What do you make of that in terms of the Obamacare part of the story?
Well, I've looked at the Ryan outline. It's Obamacare light. It does not fundamentally change direction. The Medicaid expansion stays in place. They just lower the matching rate. Instead of tax credits based on income, they're based on age. They're refundable. They're a new entitlement. The conservative Republicans are properly concerned about this. The whole cost of the Medicaid plus the tax credits is $6 trillion over the next 10 years, and that will not change hardly at all with the Ryan plan. And that's where they're starting. By the time they round up a majority, the Ryan plan will be Obamacare light, and I doubt whether they'll get the conservative Republicans to vote for it. That's why I say everything is going to break down in Capitol Hill. They need to focus on what's happening on the ground up there, not, down here in the canyons of Wall Street.
What can the president learn from Reaganomics?
I think he can learn that he's in a different world. As I said before, he's inheriting $20 trillion of debt, 10 more trillion in the pipeline. It's 106% of GDP. He has no flexibility, and if he thinks he can duplicate what Ronald Reagan did accidentally, there was a huge kind of Keynesian stimulus from these big deficits in the mid-'80s because he inherited a balance sheet that was clean. The debt was 30% of GDP. There was plenty of room to borrow. Donald Trump ought to recognize he is not the second coming of Ronald Reagan. He's inheriting 30 years. He's in a giant debt trap, and he has to stop promising all kinds of things that he absolutely cannot deliver.
Well, it sounds like you are not feeling good about anything that's going on right now at all, David.
No, I'm not, because there is a collision. You can hear the sound of the collision happening on Capitol Hill right now. It's splintering everywhere.
What about the idea that growth is going to cure a lot of these ills?
Well, the
Once
idea...
you start getting 4% growth...
Well, they said you'd get 4% growth if you get this giant tax cut through funded by more deficits.
Rollback regulations also supposed to help the growth
That'll
story.
help in the long run. In the short run, it won't, it won't impact very much at all.
All right. Warning signs from David Stockman. Thank you so much, sir. Good to see you.